Imagine a massive, like a 2-meter wide iron water pipe just buried deep underground.
Okay.
And suddenly the pressure spikes, the earth just fractures, and this colossal pipe violently bursts straight up through a paved Tokyo highway.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just shooting 10 meters up into the air. Now imagine taking that exact terrifying image of urban destruction and using it to, explain the core mechanics of the Easter resurrection.
I mean, it's a completely jarring image, to say the least.
Right.
It really shatters that comforting kind of pastel-colored expectation we usually have for these sorts of narratives.
Completely. And honestly, that is exactly our mission for today. Welcome, everyone. You are joining us for a deep dive into a really brilliant source text we recently received.
It is an incredible text.
It really is. It's a meticulously structured sermon transcript, and it's titled High Mountain and House of Prayer, or Takayama to Inori no Ai, based entirely on the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 21, verses 1 through 22. And our goal today is to deconstruct this theological puzzle for you. We are going to reverse engineer how the speaker takes a super familiar New Testament scene like Jesus flipping tables in a temple and connects it to modern Tokyo sinkholes.
Which is wild.
It's totally wild. And then traces the whole concept all the way back to Noah's Ark, just to show us how blessing, destruction, and, renewal actually work on a mechanical level.
Yeah, the structural organization of this text really is a masterclass in synthesis. I mean, it doesn't just tell you a story, it builds an argument.
Exactly.
And to really understand the architecture of that argument, we need to anchor ourselves right where the text begins, which is Matthew chapter 21.
Let's set the scene. So it is the week before the crucifixion. Jesus is riding into Jerusalem on a donkey.
Right.
The crowds are just ecstatic. They are cutting down branches, and more significantly, they are taking off their own cloaks and laying them down on the dirt road for the donkey to walk over.
It's an incredibly radical sign of submission.
Yeah, a massive sign of welcome. But then, Jesus heads directly into the central temple. And instead of delivering a comforting pastoral lesson to all these adoring crowds, he just initiates absolute chaos.
Oh, complete chaos.
He starts physically driving out the merchants and just flipping over the tables of the money changers.
And to understand the causality here, we really have to look at the historical and functional context of that temple space.
Okay, let's unpack this
Yeah.
because it's important.
Yeah. The text compares the state of the Jerusalem temple to, those highly commercialized tourist traps you see crowding the entrances of modern shrines today.
Oh, yeah, like selling trinkets and snacks right up to the gate.
Exactly. The space had drifted entirely from its original purpose. It was supposed to be a place of reverence, a point of connection between the human and the divine.
Right.
But instead, it had become this bustling transactional marketplace.
It's basically a perfect example of institutional entropy. Like any system, whether it is an ancient religion, a modern government, or, even just a tech startup, it will eventually drift from its original founding blueprint.
Oh, 100%.
It naturally degrades into this self-serving mechanism unless some disruptive force forcefully resets it. Jesus isn't just having a temper tantrum here.
No, he is acting as that disruptive force.
Exactly.
Precisely. He is forcefully confronting systemic decay. And he does this by citing ancient precedent.
Right, the Isaiah quote.
Yeah, while clearing the space, he quotes the prophet Isaiah stating, "My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you are making it a den of robbers."
Which is such a strong indictment.
It is. And this is a crucial mechanical point for you, the listener, to really grasp. The Gospel of Matthew weaves in roughly 40 different Old Testament references, either directly or implicitly.
40. Wow.
Yeah, around 40. The underlying logic here is that the New Testament is not just some standalone document.
Right, it's a continuation.
Exactly. It is a direct continuation. When Jesus clears the temple, he is violently tearing down the corrupted additions to reconnect the present reality back to a forgotten ancient promise.
I like to think of it like buying a historic home that has just been horribly remodeled by its previous owners.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Like they slapped cheap, tacky drywall over the original brick. They turned the beautiful grand parlor into a generic gift shop.
Yeah.
When Jesus walks in, he is ripping down the drywall. He is literally holding up the original architectural blueprint and demanding that the structure return to its intended design.
Well, that raises a mechanical question, doesn't it? If the current house is fundamentally corrupted, what is the actual mechanism God uses to rebuild it?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right, and the text moves into the second half of our focus in Matthew 21 to explain this.
Yeah.
Jesus encounters a leafy fig tree that looks super healthy, but it has absolutely no fruit.
And he just curses it.
Yeah, he curses it, causing it to wither instantly. And shortly after that, he tells his disciples that if they possess genuine faith, they can command a mountain to throw itself into the sea, and it will happen.
Cursing trees and throwing mountains into the ocean. I mean, on the surface, that feels so chaotic, almost arbitrary.
It really does.
Like, how does this actually connect to rebuilding a corrupted system?
Well, the underlying theology here relies on a concept of grand reversal. The text pulls from early Christian letters, specifically 1 Corinthians, to explain this core tenet.
Okay.
God intentionally uses what the world considers weak to shame the strong. He brings down what is artificially high, and he elevates what is discarded and low.
High to low, low to high.
Exactly. Look at the players in our scene. The religious leaders controlling the temple. They represented the high. They were structurally imposing, but they were bearing no real spiritual fruit.
So they were functioning exactly like that leafy, barren fig tree.
Precisely. Meanwhile, you have the children singing praises out in the streets. They represented the low. They held no institutional power at all.
Right.
Yet they were the ones elevated to actually recognize the divine.
And this is where the text brings in those wild Tokyo examples to make this abstract concept, this high going low and low going high, incredibly visceral for you.
The urban anomalies.
Yes.
Yeah.
We aren't just talking about abstract societal shifts here. We are talking about the physical topography of reality being rewritten.
Yeah, the author uses recent, documented infrastructural failures to prove that our perception of stability is basically an illusion.
They detail a sudden road collapse at a busy intersection.
Yeah.
Like a massive sinkhole just opens up out of nowhere and swallows a commercial truck hole.
It's terrifying.
The high street, totally solid, reinforced asphalt 1 minute, instantly drops into a subterranean void. The high is brought low.
Right.
And then the exact opposite happens. The image we started the show with, a huge iron water pipe under the highway violently bursts upward, rising 10 meters into the air.
The hidden low thing is violently thrust into the sky.
Exactly. They even mention ancient, deeply rooted cherry blossom trees suddenly toppling over, despite there being absolutely no wind.
I mean, these aren't just sensational news stories. They are structural metaphors.
Yeah.
We navigate our daily lives assuming the ground beneath us is permanent. We assume the institutions we rely on, like the commercialized temple or a paved highway, are fixed realities.
But they're not?
No. The text argues that the divine has the capacity to instantly reorder that reality. The topography of your life can change in a fraction of a second.
So we have this disruptive force capable of tearing down the old structure and flipping our reality upside down. But, we still need to know what we're actually building toward.
Right, the new blueprint.
Yeah. Jesus says his house is a house of prayer, and he quotes Isaiah, but Isaiah specifically mentions bringing people to a holy mountain to enjoy this house of prayer.
And this is a huge pivot in the sermon.
Yeah, why a mountain? When you think of a holy mountain in this context, the immediate assumption is, I don't know, Mount Sinai, where the 10 Commandments were given.
Sure.
Or perhaps Mount Zion, where the physical temple was built.
But this is where the argument makes a structurally brilliant leap. It bypasses Sinai completely.
It's so surprising.
It bypasses Jerusalem too.
Oh.
To find the true original blueprint of this holy mountain and this house of prayer, the text traces the logic all the way back to the book of Genesis.
All the way back.
All the way back. It takes us to the very first altar ever recorded after the total destruction of the earth. It takes us to Mount Ararat.
Okay, I have to challenge this premise, though.
Okay, go for it.
You are saying God's ultimate intention is a holy mountain of prayer and blessing, but we are talking about Mount Ararat. That is the landing pad for Noah's Ark.
Yes, it is.
The whole world was literally just wiped out by a catastrophic, suffocating flood. Everything is dead. How can the site of a global extermination be the origin point for a holy mountain?
I know. It sounds like a total paradox. But it requires looking at the ancient cosmology the author is referencing.
Okay.
According to that worldview, before the flood, the earth was irreparably corrupted by violence and systemic decay.
Basically a macrocosm of the corrupted temple we discussed earlier.
Exactly. The floodwaters were not just a punishment, they were an absolute necessary cleansing. The waters basically uncreated the corrupted world.
Uncreated it. Wow.
Yeah. Now consider Mount Ararat. As the waters receded, Ararat was the highest peak to emerge.
Oh,
It
right.
was pristine, completely untouched by the previous corruption. So when Noah steps off the ark onto this peak,
Hmm.
what is the very first thing he does?
He builds an altar.
He builds an altar, he offers a sacrifice,
Mm.
and the ancient text notes that God smelled the pleasing aroma.
Yeah.
Ararat is the prototype. It is the very first true house of prayer on a high mountain.
I see. Okay, so the flood was essentially the ultimate hard reset of a corrupted operating system.
Yes, exactly.
The bad code of violence had infected everything. And you can't just patch that kind of systemic failure. You have to wipe the hard drive completely clean.
Right.
So Mount Ararat is the first booting up of the new clean operating system. And the very first keystroke of that new system is Noah's prayer on the mountain.
That is an excellent analogy. Really perfect. And on this freshly washed, rebooted mountain, God issues a profound covenant.
The promise.
Yeah. Up until this moment in the Genesis narrative, humanity had been locked in this downward spiral of curses, starting all the way back in Eden. But here, the paradigm shifts entirely.
God promises never to curse the earth with the flood again.
Exactly. Instead, he commands Noah and his family to be fruitful and multiply. The core thesis the text extracts from this is that God's foundational operating system is not destruction, it is blessing.
And the author makes a really critical point about the mechanics of this blessing. Once God blesses something, it
Sure.
becomes irreversible.
Right, it's locked in.
It is woven into the very fabric of reality. They reference a later narrative where a figure named Balaam is hired to issue a curse against the Israelites.
Oh, the Balaam story, yeah.
Right, but Balaam finds himself physically incapable of doing it. He states that because God has already blessed them, the blessing just completely overrides any attempted curse.
It is an immutable law of this new operating system.
But, to inherit that irreversible blessing, to actually survive that catastrophic hard reset, required an impossible feat of obedience.
It did. The text spends significant time detailing the sheer physics and psychology of the ark's construction to really drive this point home.
Because Noah was not a maritime engineer.
Not at all. He was a simple vineyard farmer.
Yeah.
Yet he is tasked with constructing a 3-story vessel.
Which is huge.
We're talking about a ship roughly 135 meters long and 13.5 meters high,
That is the size of a modern 6-story building.
built entirely by hand, by an agrarian family.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. Just think about the last time you tried to assemble a basic piece of IKEA furniture with your family.
Oh, no.
The tension, right, the arguments over the instructions. Now imagine spending 50 years building a 6-story wooden ship with them,
Without a single manual.
using ancient tools. The psychological weight of that is staggering. 50 years of manual labor while enduring the constant mockery of an entire society that thinks you've completely lost your mind.
It highlights a crucial mechanism, though. Survival required absolute perfect cooperation.
Yeah.
The 8 family members inside that operation had to work in total unity. If they had cut corners on the pitch, sealing the wood, or, if they had allowed internal conflicts to halt construction, the ship would have had structural vulnerability.
It would have just sunk under the pressure of the chaos outside.
Exactly.
And this leads to what I think is the most profound philosophical shift in the entire text. We typically trace human ancestry back to Abraham, which immediately segments us.
Right, into different lineages.
Yeah, it leads to the division of Judeo-Christian and Islamic lineages, creating this sort of us versus them paradigm that fuels so much of our modern geopolitical conflict.
But the author points out a mathematical reality of the text.
Right. Every single one of the 6 to 7 billion people alive today traces their lineage back to Noah.
It fundamentally rewrites our perspective on human division.
It really does.
If we internalize the idea that we are all descendants of those 8 people, it means we all share the same origin story of survival.
We are not disparate warring factions.
No, we are a single global family that shared a lifeboat.
It changes everything. It frames the concept of the Ark not just as a historical wooden boat, but as the blueprint for the modern community of faith.
A vessel of perfect unified cooperation.
Designed to insulate humanity from the floodwaters of judgment and, frankly, societal collapse.
Which brings us to the final mechanism we need to unpack.
Right.
We have traced the narrative from the corrupted temple in Matthew back to the ancient prototype of the holy mountain on Ararat. Now we have to close the loop.
How does an ancient flood actually equate to the Easter resurrection?
Exactly. What is the physical and spiritual causality that links Noah's wooden boat to the central event of the Christian faith?
Right. We have all these puzzle pieces, Jesus flipping tables, the Tokyo sinkholes, the 50-year ship build. But we need the cipher that translates the ancient flood into the Easter promise of a new reality.
The cipher is found in the epistles of Peter, which the text uses as its final structural pillar.
Okay, Peter's epistles.
Yeah. The Apostle Peter writes to early communities, warning them against complacency. He notes that people will eventually scoff at the idea of divine intervention.
Because things feel so stable.
Exactly. They will look at the paved highways and the established institutions and assume the world is permanent, forgetting that the ancient world was entirely dismantled by water.
Wow.
Peter reminds them that the current structures are equally impermanent. He is warning them against the illusion of control, the exact same illusion shattered by that Tokyo water pipe bursting.
But Peter does not just warn them about destruction. He provides a deeply complex theological connection between Jesus and Noah. He writes about Christ going to preach to the spirits in prison.
Right.
How does the author of our text interpret that?
Well, the author argues that it was the Spirit of Christ who actively supervised Noah during the construction of the ark.
Oh, I see.
Because, mechanically speaking, a simple farmer could never have engineered a vessel capable of withstanding the hydraulic pressure of a global flood on his own.
No way.
The Spirit of Christ was the true architect. Therefore, the flood is not merely a historical anecdote. It operates as the ultimate type or physical foreshadowing of spiritual baptism.
Let's break that down for the listener because the mechanism here is fascinating. In ancient cosmology, deep water almost always represented chaos, death, and the abyss.
Yes.
To be submerged in the floodwaters was to be swallowed by death itself. So the ark acts as a literal containment vessel.
Right.
It allows humanity to pass safely through the waters of death, completely insulated by the wood of the ship.
Exactly. And that physical mechanism maps perfectly onto the Christian concept of baptism and resurrection.
Okay.
Through faith, an individual is placed inside the ark of Christ. They pass through the waters of judgment, which is the death of their old corrupted nature, and they emerge on the other side, entirely clean and untouched by the chaos.
So the physical wood of the ark foreshadows the physical wood of the cross.
Yes, and none of this theoretical framework means anything without the final event of Easter,
Yeah.
the resurrection. The resurrection is the proof that the vessel holds, that the passage through death is actually survivable.
The text ends with this deeply personal cinematic imagery that grounds all of this heavy theology in something you can actually feel.
It's a beautiful ending.
The author describes taking a walk outside after a heavy, gloomy, multi-day rainstorm. He walks toward a local park, and suddenly the storm breaks. The sun violently pierces through the clouds.
And the light hits the residual water. It illuminates the puddles on the asphalt and the tiny droplets clinging to the vegetation.
But the author specifically notes that it wasn't the grand, cultivated cherry blossoms that caught his attention. It was the nameless, ordinary weeds and blades of grass by the side of the road.
Right.
Because of the intense light hitting the water, the world looked incredibly vibrant. He describes the leaves as looking like they were screaming, "I am alive!"
Wow.
The entire landscape felt like it was expanding and breathing.
It is a sensory manifestation of that rebooted operating system we discussed earlier.
Exactly. The author connects that exact visceral feeling of breathing in the post-storm air to what Noah must have experienced.
Imagine that.
Imagine being locked in a dark, pitch-sealed box for months, surrounded by the sounds of global destruction, and then finally pulling back the heavy covering of the ark and stepping out onto the high peak of Mount Ararat.
The world has been washed completely clean.
You step into a totally vibrant, newly created reality where the very grass is practically vibrating with life. That is the mechanical promise of the Easter resurrection.
It is not just about wiping the slate clean.
No. It is about stepping out of the vessel into a reality that is violently, undeniably alive.
When you look at the entirety of the structural map we have just navigated, the brilliance of the text is really undeniable.
It's an amazing journey.
We began in Matthew chapter 21 with a corrupted institution. Jesus, acting as the disruptive force, tears down the commercialized temple because it had lost its purpose.
He demands a return to the original blueprint of the Holy Mountain, prophesied by Isaiah.
Right. We then trace that blueprint back past Sinai, past Jerusalem, all the way to Mount Ararat, the site of humanity's hard reset.
We examine the impossible mechanics of the ark.
And the irreversible covenant of blessing. And finally, through the lens of Peter's epistles, we snapped right back to the present reality.
The floodwaters translate into the baptism that washes the world clean.
And the resurrected Christ acts as the ultimate ark, guaranteeing safe passage into a vibrant new creation.
It fundamentally rewrites how you engage with these texts. You can't just look at the story of Jesus flipping tables as a simple lesson in anger management anymore.
No, not at all.
He wasn't just clearing floor space. He was forcefully demanding that humanity reclaim the high mountain view. He was initiating the hard reset.
Well said.
Thank you all for joining us as we worked through this incredible puzzle. We have covered an immense amount of ground today, tracing the lines from ancient wooden arcs to bursting Tokyo highways. But before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to carry with you.
Let's hear it.
Think about the mechanics of the flood we just discussed. Think about the broken pavement in Tokyo, where the hidden, low things were violently forced to the surface.
Right.
We spend so much of our lives trying to build permanent structures to protect ourselves from chaos, and we panic when those structures fail. But if the absolute destruction of the ancient flood was actually just the necessary mechanical setup for God's eternal, irreversible covenant of blessing, what current upheavals in your own life might be operating the exact same way?
That's a great question.
What sudden disasters, career sinkholes, or shattered plans might actually just be the heavy rain clearing the corrupted architecture away, preparing you to step out onto your own high mountain into a vibrant, entirely new beginning?